So I read this Peterson guy, and his book, the 12-step book, it's very useful. I can't criticize it for the fact that it doesn't always engage me. It's a bit long-winded for what I need to read, but I can't say that it's long-winded for if I was 16-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid. It breaks really deep and heavy shit apart. But I feel guilty because this Peterson guy, he's talking about the neo-Marxists and the deconstructivists and the people that are attacking the West. But I mean, there are also people that just don't want to create any type of system, who nevertheless use similar techniques, but are hoping to liberate people, are hoping to make people's lives better by making their brains sharper and by creating more outs for them. I mean, I remember you wrote it one time. You said these guys have an issue with the West. In other words, a lot of these guys who probably needed Peterson's book, why don't they just leave the fucking country? And there's a part where someone could really get confused about what your message was, or what our message was, or at least what the plan was. It wasn't to escape responsibility. This is Peterson's whole thing. He says these young guys have just been told to pursue their freedom, and it's made them aimless, and they haven't ever been able to live a life and grow by assuming responsibility. But the thing about the bike trip is, I don't believe it's an escape at all. The bike trip is an entrepreneurial project. It's an independent project. It's something which teaches a young man more responsibility than any job or family, because the responsibility is self-preservation, bike maintenance, food, water, geography, topography, reenacting the hunter-gatherer. And I think Peterson would agree. If he wasn't already familiar with this type of cowboy trip, he'd completely agree. But it's very easy. It's very easy to face criticism from Peterson admirers because of something like that. If you have a problem with the West, ditch it. But it wasn't abandon the West and castigate yourself from the West. It was see new cultures because young men must be risk takers and explorers. Peterson would say that was our message and that was the whole point. And then if our suggestion was and get on a bike, we're basically telling a young man to learn all of the things that I think he would learn by reading Peterson's book. But then there's
if there is a difference, it lies in this, in that perhaps someone would read Peterson's book and want to learn bike maintenance, learn Spanish, and head to South America for some life-changing adventure.
And what a great project! What a great project!
Direction.
And it doesn't indebt a young guy either. No college loan.
But let me make one more point though, is that it could be the kind of project and adventure that is not about abandoning the West, but sort of like an initiation ritual into his own manhood, so that he can return to the West with a greater confidence.
Absolutely.
And perhaps become a part of corporate America or excel in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be an abandonment of everything.
The thing
people
is
talking
that
about abandonment.
If it's an abandonment,
I talked about abandonment.
If it's an abandonment, if it really is, because you can.
But I talked about it, and I'm a lot more radical in what I was looking for. I was looking to really cut that shit out, get away, and try and do something totally new. But the skills are the same, really. If you want to just go for a sort of an initiation, masculine building ritual kind of thing, you've got to have the same skills as the guy who's trying to abandon the Western project and never come back or something.
But the important thing is, and I think
you got to put the work in.
Yeah.
My point is, you got to put the work in.
But abandonment is not the same thing as an escape from reality. Escape is a form of either self-preservation, and I'm not going to knock that, or cowardice, and that's something I would say don't do it. It's not going to make your life better. Escape is sometimes fine, but I don't believe abandonment is the same thing as escape. Abandonment actually could be progress. It could be a rational decision. If you think about it this way,
maybe a better word though is breaking away. You remember that great film from 1980 or whatever it was in Indiana at IU about the guy who learns Italian. He believes he's Italian, and he wants to race against the Cinzano guys, and it's all about this coming of age, this initiation into. I mean, we're talking about young men right now, and Peterson's talking about young men, and this really seems to be the core issue, is that Western society is alienating young men. They're alienating something that's intrinsic to young men, and they're telling them that I'm speaking very generally right now. I don't really like to talk like this, but I think that there is this something happening, and so we can speak about it generally, but it's much better to speak about it specifically within our own lives, because I think we have responded to this same alienation by achieving certain things and taking certain risks. And in a sense, these were initiation rituals into some sort of manhood that we had to do on our own. It wasn't something that the tribe allowed us to do. We had to leave the country to do it. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, and I'm not saying it means breaking with the West entirely. It could be different for everybody, but a young man has to go through something. And that's what's missing, I think, for a lot of these young men who maybe are struggling, and that Jordan Peterson is getting an audience with.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on some good points, and I think there's a modern and ancient correlates there. I mean, I think the modern correlate is you have examples of, guys like Bill Gates or Michael Dell leaving college, good colleges, to pursue something else. There's a young guy that Peterson interviewed a couple days ago, actually from our Illinois suburbs. And this kid has got an organization that has 1,100 chapters at the universities. He raised $10.5 million from businesses last year. It's a conservative group that supports free speech, but this kid didn't go to college. And then the ancient correlate, I think, is the young guy from a tribe who's sent out into the wilderness with no support from the tribe, and he has to live a year on his own. And I think he's kicked out at a pretty young age, like 13, 14, 15. And he has to deal.
But part of that was, part of that with a number of these tribes was, particularly with the Inuit, was about going out and being summoned by your spirit. And the young man who went out and was not contacted by any spirit came back defeated. I mean, he wondered what was. It was just a great failure. These things could happen, and so I mean, there's this whole, we've talked about the divinities before, and we've talked about I don't know. I was watching some more Peterson videos. He was talking about metaphysics and the metaphysical, and a bit more about Jung and these archetypes, which I guess I generally think are some sort of divinities made physical or put into the instincts or something. So I think actually Peterson's trying to go about this the right way philosophically without ever specifying something specifically and getting himself involved in some big heady philosophical argument. But there are things that young men can go out and be summoned by, and they need to go out and be summoned by these things. They need to put themselves at that point of exposure, and they need to find out what kind of man they're going to become. That's an event. That's not something that happens while you're working somewhere and being a part of a family. That happens when you're on your own. You're sent off on your own for these discoveries. So this is an important thing.
Now, so there's a society that actually doesn't force alienation of these young guys. You're saying that they actually send these young guys out as something that they think it'll be beneficial?
Well, there's whole traditions of that dating back throughout human history in kind of any culture you can look at. There are these some sort of masculinity and initiation rituals. The Greeks had it. All sorts of warrior cultures had it, and it wasn't necessarily warrior cultures. It was just go out and be summoned by something greater than you, and that will be the thing that guides you in life. I mean, sometimes there were cultures that people had no names until they actually went out and discovered their name was be given to them by some sort of divinity.
Huh. So I mean, this is almost like, I mean, I wouldn't feel guilty about giving somebody.
But this is for young men, though. This is for young men. It's not for young girls. This is something that's just for young men, and I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to generalize. It's very hard to generalize. I think I'm kind of defeating the whole idea of it by generalizing about, in an anthropological sense across all these different cultures that had these things. So I don't want to get into it too specifically or too generally, but I'm saying these things are out there. And the question is within this culture, would these things be appreciated? And I'm not sure that they are. If you're going to say that young girls and young boys are the same and should be socialized instead of sent off, like a young boy should be sent off on his own to make some sort of special discovery, that goes against the way things are currently headed. That knowledge is not appreciated,
Yeah. I mean, so these, but what I wanted to draw on is that there's this wonderful distinction between something where a man reaches a breaking point and he does something positive. The alienation is something that generated something a very positive response. I mean, if young guys went out and got on a bicycle for a year and a half and lived in the wilderness and made all of these friends from other perspectives and other parts of the globe and really toughened himself and learned how to live in a different level of hygiene and either an immersion in another culture where there's a lot of socialization, a lot of encounters with other people, or a lot of isolation and solitude in the wilderness. I mean, this is an incredible cathartic process. I mean, if a culture had a coming of age for a young guy where they sent him off for a year and a half on a bike to see the world, and each guy did different parts of the world. I mean, what a great thing! What a great thing!
But contrast that with what you and I did, which there was no one sending us anywhere. In fact, it was just the opposite. The meltdowns that happened at the dinner table after I announced I was going to Bulgaria on a bicycle. I wasn't going to be working for Goldman Sachs. These were.
You mean it didn't bring tears of joy? I mean, it didn't say, "Hey, we're gonna take you out for dinner, young man." What a great idea!
No one came to me. No one came to me and proposed an initiation ritual for me to discover my divinity and become a man through some bicycle trip. It was just the opposite. It was
an initiation ritual. It's an initiation ritual for families to become upset about that kind of thing. I mean, that was the initiation ritual.
I mean, the thing is that I never felt throughout that entire time that I had a choice in what I wanted to do, in what I was doing. And the choice is up through my life. I had to go to college. I had to go to high school. I had to do all these things. I couldn't drop out. I had to study what I had to study. My choices were extremely limited. But the one choice that I felt that I had to make was got to get on a bicycle and go to Bulgaria after I graduate. And I can't work. I cannot do anything like that. And that to me wasn't my first choice in life. I mean, I was free.
I mean, you would have been a very unhappy participant in any engagement. You would have been really upset about working. I mean, if you'd have been stuck and you would have gotten into the grind. I mean,
no, there was no choice. I'm saying that there was no choice for me in the matter that. At the university I went to, I was called down to the dean's office a few times, and they were asking me why I had not interviewed with the top investment banks out of New York. And I was I graduated very, very, very high in my class, one of the top 5 maybe in finance.
Yep.
And
yep. I mean, because those were the easy classes for you, right? I mean, philosophy you said was the hard stuff.
Well, philosophy philosophy was easy after a while too. I mean, all the classes are bullshit after a while. As after junior year, I was ready to leave. I didn't need any more of this. I could get everything from a library. It was not worth it to be there. But you couldn't get a degree from going to a library, and that's why you had to stick around. But anyway, so I was in the position of these investment banks want to interview me, but I don't want to go there. I want to go to Bulgaria. I'm learning Bulgarian. I want to get on a bicycle. I want to do it. There was no sense in my mind of any choice. This was just something that I had to do. I didn't feel like I was saying no to anybody. It was just I didn't care. It just didn't interest me. It was totally irrelevant. The money they were talking about, the careers, it meant nothing. It absolutely meant nothing to me. And
so
I don't know.
You
I think
had no choice.
I think the pressures, though.
But touching back, you mentioned 3 concepts that I think kind of require revisiting. And the 3 concepts were breaking away, alienation, and boredom. And I think they're kind of in 3 different circumstances, but they're not mutually exclusive. Breaking away can just be a positive thing. Think about an athlete that wins a race. I mean, an athlete's not abandoning his responsibility to be mediocre. Let's call this a 10,000 meter race, right? And if the goal is like Yanta's law, where everybody's got to finish together, then everybody's going to have to run at the lowest common denominator. But if the goal is to break a world record, there's going to be a guy who's going to lap the lowest common denominator by 10 laps. He's going to run twice as fast as him. He's going to run nearly about like a 4:05 mile for 6 miles. So the concept of breaking away is by allowing those with the confidence to do such a thing. Because the observation that I had a hard time, I think Chrome touched on this. He said, look, if everything you did was so easy and obvious to everyone else, it wouldn't be worth doing. So that's the first thing that has to be recognized, is that breaking away and going for a world record, in other words, it's just the risk that I'm going to take off on Earth and hope it doesn't end up a disaster, end up breaking me or killing me. It's not for everybody.
No, but here's the thing though that I think that's important, is that I think young people, young men especially today, are waiting to be told the way forward. Whereas breaking away is all about you feel that you have no choice. There's divinities that are guiding you, bigger forces, and you don't have a question about the way forward. And I think there's a lot of questioning going on about how to live, especially, and big choices, or what should I do, and the systemization of things and socialization of things has gotten to the point where people, young men especially, are questioning what they're doing before they're doing it. And what we're talking about right now, the idea of breaking away, it's just, I mean, there's no choice. There's no choice to be made. You're just doing it. Maybe it's just I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that. You've either got it or you don't. You really either got it or you don't. If you're doubting yourself a little bit, then you probably weren't cut out for it. But the second point I would make, though, is that the initiation rituals that happened in tribal cultures, those things were socialized. Those things were not something that the young man wanted to do on his own.
Same effect. Same effect, though. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't know if it's the same effect.
But check it. I don't know if it's the same effect.
But check it out. I mean, I don't think that the conditions were such when you really send somebody out in the wild. The wild's the fucking wild. Whether someone sends you off on the plank or you jump off that ship yourself, you got the same experience looking you right in the face. And I think, for us, if somebody had planned or guided, such a journey, yeah, I get your point. But the wilderness is I'm talking about this for the tribe. The wilderness is the wilderness. Now, I think maybe just as Peterson's book is a lot friendlier than a book you or I would have written, because I think the book you would have written is, if you don't want to do this to begin with, you're kind of fucked. And I think Peterson is reaching out to people and saying, here's all these micro steps. And so maybe if you're not going to have the courage to do this, here's the minimum risk you could take, or here's what you can do with your life. And this is, I think, his whole point. But the concept, there's two things that can drive somebody to break away, and it's alienation and boredom. Boredom is the most dangerous. It can sink someone, turn them into a very dark place where they want to just stick around and pick fights when it's not going to do anybody good, especially themselves. And this would be these Western guys that pick all these fights with the gender stuff or the getting locked down in a job and all that kind of crap. And I mean, really what they should be doing is preparing themselves to live a minimal life, assuming society doesn't get better. I mean, obviously it's great to fight, but there's a certain point where if you got 8 years stacked against you, let's say a political regime, maybe you need to be prepared to live in the wilderness or live abroad and make a useful life for yourself, reading, writing, or doing something great outside of the grind that's working against you. And then the alienation. This is something I actually want to bracket, because I think the alienation thing is actually the main thing I wanted to talk about, because the alienation can be confused or conflated with, I think, that whole neo-Marxist use of deconstruction. And I don't think deconstruction, by the way, is a bad thing. I think smart people forever have been breaking apart the foundations of what makes sense in general, like the norms, the mores, and all that. Analyzing that and challenging the very concept of meaning is a healthy thing. And you had the ancient Greek skeptics, and you had Wittgenstein himself, who had a background in math and logic, but was questioning the very meaning of those kinds of things that are very useful to get at the core meaning of experience from a phenomenological perspective. But going back to alienation, I mean, a person can be alienated and have a reaction such as criticizing the West and criticizing the most powerful Western tools, as did Wittgenstein. But it's not due to a lack of appreciation or desire to destroy these tools, because he wants to build on them. He clearly understands that these logical tools led him to this very dissatisfaction in the first place, and he's expressing himself logically and weighing one thing from another, weighing one cultural life from another. But it seems to me, General, are you inside of a washing machine right now?
I am. There's a woman behind me who's running a microwave.
That happens. But getting back to alienation, though, I mean, I think you've got a tribe of people that are alienated, and then they use deconstruction and they use various philosophical tools to attack the West. But even more perversely, they get inside of the universities, and instead of giving people the big picture and telling them their story and telling them, their biases, and calling the balls and strikes on logic and deconstruction and the value of meaning and whether truth exists and all that kind of stuff, they actually feed certain political lines, ideological lines, without giving evidence or meaning or reason.
Yeah, but a lot of this is based really upon these massive amounts of people and motivating these big crowds.
So you're getting back to crowds. You're getting back to crowds immediately. Okay.
I am. I think when you get away from the local, you get into these aberrations, and there are people that are trying to live the life of a person in a crowd, and I think that is either, for some people it's extremely fulfilling, and for some people it's extremely destructive. And I think for the people that it's very destructive for, those are the people that want to to perhaps break away, or those are the people that feel some sort of alienation, that they're not that comfortable within the crowd. These are people like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and there's a long history of these people that have felt uncomfortable. But now we're looking at crowd formations of a much, much bigger intensity and size, just in terms of human population on the earth. And so the degree of alienation and the degree of feeling not a part of something perhaps is even larger. And then if you look at the same time at the breakdown of local communities have just been decimated. You don't have the small towns. You don't have any of that going on. Everyone's living in these big urban centers. So I think you really have to keep, when we talk about where things are at philosophically, you have to say, how do these ideas work at a local level or among 50 people?
Yeah.
How do these ideas work
Yeah.
among 350 million people? I mean, 350 million people is such an abstraction. It means it's meaningless. And unfortunately, the philosophical ideas that we have from, 100 years ago, when people actually were maybe speaking locally, these are now being applied to populations of 350 million. And I'm just not sure. I just don't think it makes any sense.
So are you suggesting that in the act of breaking away, the perception of the crowd is broken and recrystallized and reformed, and a multiplicity of crowd formations then happens as the young man travels and sees local communities and redefines his mentality, his group mentality. It's almost liberating because he's almost in a different village every day. Is this something that is an antidote?
Well, if you could, the best trips you can make, if you've been living in an urban environment and been living in crowds and things like that, are to be involved in situations and places where there are very small amounts of people, very localized communities, and to try and connect in those communities and do something important in those communities. I would say that is probably the most important initiation ritual for a young Western man.
Now
to get out of the mass crowd formation places and get into the real nitty-gritty heart of a local environment.
So I mean, this is really about the negative influence of the crowd. I mean, I can't imagine a society, a small tribe, if it's working properly, if it would invoke alienation or boredom. Now, having said that, I mean, I can't imagine that a tribe operates by Yanta's law. I can't imagine that a tribe would penalize a guy for wanting to do something Western, like break away from the tribe and travel and start his own tribe or join another tribe. I mean, or perhaps is it too anachronistic for me to apply the concept of the Yanta law to a tribe? Why not?
It could be that there's a Yanta law happening with it. I mean, all tribes are different. I mean, we're talking about local stuff. The whole point, I think, is just for if someone is breaking away from the West in a very general way. And what I mean by West is these massive population centers where corporations dominate and political ideas are fighting about cultural Marxism and left and right. And this is the battleground they feel that they're involved at. Everything changes when you go to some little South American place and you see the way people live, and these questions are no longer questions for those people. Yeah. That's a very important experience. That is an experience which you may decide to live in that place, or you may decide to come home, but hopefully you'll be changed by it. But you have to go there equipped to understand what you're experiencing, which means you got to have a language capacity. You've got to have time to be able to spend there. You've got to be sensitive to the people. You've got to be open. You can't be judgmental. These are all very important skills. I don't know if Peterson gets into any of this, but I mean, this is all part of. You can be alienated, and you can go to these places and be an asshole, or you can want to really truly break away and abandon the West and have a great experience.
And you can go,
and you may come back to
and
the
you can
West.
go to another culture, and you can try as best as you can to fit in and learn the language, and you can feel alienated, and you can have a shitty experience. That's all part of. You can have a shitty.
Yeah, you might be in the wrong.
You can
place.
have a shitty experience by
you know?
thinking that it's a great idea to go cut firewood, and you can cut your fucking foot off. You can have shit can go wrong. You can go on a bike trip and you can run out of water and die. But
and it's not
I liked.
And it's not, and the answer is not, it was a shitty idea to leave and a shitty idea to try that. No, you just didn't go to the right spot. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just keep looking around. I mean, it takes time. You don't just
look, and disasters are going to happen no matter what you do. I mean, even if you are very well adjusted and you try to get that job at Goldman Sachs, shit can happen. Shit can always happen, and shit can be so bad that it can break a guy and not make him stronger, and he might not be able to take it. But that's true in any, you go out for a hunt, you can get killed. Whatever you're hunting can get you, or you can fall on your spear. I mean, shit's going to happen. You can't stop taking risks. Bad shit can happen. But I liked your point about the new horizon of questions, because not only, and I'm going to tie this into our first bike trip. So just let me. I've got, this is going to sound boring, but it's going to get exciting. The new horizon of questions is that people aren't asking the same questions that you had been asking yourself. A lot of people say, I'm going to go out on a trip and I'm going to have an answer to a question. But I think that what's going to really throw them for a loop positively is they're no longer going to be asking that question. That is no longer going to be the thing they're trying to solve. You just indicated that people are solving a different set of problems. Now, remember, not too far in to our bike trip, I think, I can't recall if it was just outside of Belgium or maybe still within Belgium, but we're trying to find a place to crash for the night. We ended up camping. We ran into an Irish guy in his mid to late 70s, and he was a school teacher in Ireland, and he would ride his bike from Ireland to Italy, and then I think Eurail it back, but he would stay in hostels or along the way. Remember, he had a big bottle of orange like Fanta in his bottle cage, but he also would carry a tarp with him in case he couldn't find a place. But he said that the reason why he traveled and the reason why he did it every summer is he wanted to meet other cultures and see how they solved their problems. Now, it wasn't that he said,
That's
I
right.
wanted to see what their answers were to the problems, the set of problems that I have in my head. It was, I want to see how people solve their problems, whatever problems those might be. And every culture has problems. Every culture has things they're trying to figure out. I mean, there's no way that life is easy for anybody, no matter how they live. They always have things they're trying to figure out. And that's the great gift of going to an unfamiliar place, is that you suddenly become entrenched in their own problems. And those make you completely immersed in their way of living and their way of thinking and way of feeling and communicating. That's the liberating thing, is to get involved in solving another completely alien problem.
That's the hardest thing to do, though. That's the hardest thing to do, though, is to actually, when you get to the point where their problems become your problems, and you really feel their problems as your own, and you share their problems. But you've got to have a language capacity, you've got to have a cultural capacity, you've got to spend time. This isn't for some backpacker traveling through.
No, and your point, I mean, it can be basic shit. It can be like, your first week of living in a country and you realize, well, they jerry-rig a heater right next to the water source in a shower, and you don't want to electrocute yourself when you're changing one. That was when I moved to Sao Paulo.
Is that Bulgaria?
No, I happened to Bulgaria. They had a guy fix it for me, but it was expected that any man worth his salt.
Didn't Bulgaria? Didn't you go to like they would dispense rakia, the alcoholic fermented what is it from?
Grape.
From grapes? Yeah. I think it's from Turkey originally, but the Turks left it as part of their heritage in Bulgaria. Didn't they have like a dispenser, like a tap or something in the middle of the town? could go fill up
a
or
lot.
something?
Yeah, a lot of the stores, the magazines, would have a couple types of rakia, and I would go for the Grozden rakia, which is the grape rakia, and it was real rot gut coming from that barrel. But yeah, a lot of people would just have a little like Aquafina bottle, it wasn't Aquafina, whatever, water bottle, plastic bottle, and you paid about 30 cents for it. But yeah, so in Bulgaria, I had a water heater meltdown, but a maintenance guy changed it. When I was living in Brazil, the water heater shorted out, and you're basically just hand wiring melted. You buy a new apparatus and you hand wire these melted wires, old to new, and you install it. And your girlfriend at the time expects that that's a thing you should know how to do. So you get that. That's a very minor example, but the problem of what people are protesting, the problem of how people deal with drought, the problem how people wire their electricity, but it's obviously the way that they're living immediately begins to become your new reality, and that's a very healthy thing. It's like cross training, and you're being, it's the greatest form of responsibility, because unlike a backpacker who can move on, if you've settled down into a new culture, you're playing by a brand new set of rules. It's like a brand new job, and you have to learn the language, and you can't escape by speaking your own language, and by obeying someone else's cultural rules, and by
well, especially though if you're living in a location which is not filled with gringos, so you're totally cut off. You are really living in this new way. And maybe the first time everyone on the street sees you, you go into some stores, they think you're some gringo idiot, and then they realize, wait, the guy speaks Portuguese, the guy speaks Spanish, he seems to really know what he's doing here. The mentality immediately changes. Then they become, we're vecinos,
Well, how is that any different than committing yourself to a very demanding job? Now, that very demanding job might be working on a boat, which I can't think of any metaphor stronger where there's in terms of there being no escape. In terms of there not being any type of way to fly back home. If you're on a boat, 5-day trip, you're there, and you have no ability to break down or to have a bad day. You've got to get through that trip. Now you might be able to get off on the next unloading, but that 5-day trip it's not just 5 temporal days. It's far more intense. Similarly, when you're living in a country, and if it's truly a place where it's far enough from the West where there's no Western contact or Western escape, I mean, you're locked in. But an intense job such as a futures trader is the same way. There's no way to suddenly say you want to go into a clerical role when you're a P&L guy and you're trading the firm's capital. And similarly, at a big corporation, if you're locked in and you have to learn the rules and you have a great deal of responsibility, I don't see how that's different than the bike trip. So I mean, I think the way that you can deal with things like alienation and boredom, you have a couple of choices. You can have some type of nihilistic attack on the very thing that is making you bored or making you alienated, or you can break away. And breaking away is not a form of escape, but it's actually the journey of risk and challenge that every young person must take. And I would say that anybody must take, irrespective of their age. I mean, I think we're constantly going on these journeys. I don't think it happens once at a person's adolescence. I think it happens many times throughout their lives. And people will get bored or alienated. I mean, I think that the young man in the tribe, I mean, he was coddled. I mean, he wasn't coddled, but he was part of some safer structure. And I think that you could argue, that he was that in order for him to not be bored and for him not to be alienated and for him not to become soft, in order for him to become challenged and a resource to the tribe, they send this young man away for a year to live in the wilderness. And so I know that it's probably unsafe to make comparisons and that every tribe is different, but I mean I think I've got something in mind that makes makes sense to me, and that I should be able to understand.
The thing is, though, is that we're not living in a tribal society anymore. We're living in a vast crowd formation. So we don't have the structures present to send young men out to get some special knowledge. And we certainly don't appreciate that knowledge when they return, especially coming from America, which I don't think has a very...
but why not let's say a miracle occurs. Let's say a miracle occurs, and you and I write some great philosophical book like Peterson's book, but it's about bike touring. It's a really great book, and it's very compelling. It maybe blends a couple of our stories as like a substrate for a technical guide for how to do this, but as part of it, it basically says, throw away your fucking smartphone, get an idea of the geography, but don't bring a map, but be aware of where the roads may or may not be. Be aware of the limitations of ripio and water and food, and do something great. And only try to make a good mark by learning villages and spending time and.
But I think it's simpler. I think it's simpler than that, though. I think what's missing out of all of these guides that are written for these travelers and there are all kinds of people that are going on these adventures and trying to have these experiences that are gonna give them what they're looking for, whatever that is. And for one thing, these people that always go on these trips, they always have a return ticket. It's not an open-ended trip. That's the first thing, and that changes your whole perspective. It's got to be a one-way ticket, and you're going to figure things out as you go. The second thing is you've got to be prepared. And preparation is not maps. Preparation is not knowing where you're going to be 6 months from now. Preparation is being able to speak to people. And the idea should be is that you're going into a local community. You're trying to understand how people live locally, which is really the adventure for Western people today. Because we live in a crowd, a massive crowd, an internet crowd, everything. You're trying to get to a place where people aren't living like that. That's the real trip to take. The real trip to take is to try and be accepted by a group of 150 people, try and be accepted into some family, and to take it seriously, and to not be thinking about leaving, and to not have a return ticket, and to really, really become a part of it. And that is the hard thing. That is the initiation ritual. That is the real initiation, which is into some local community. Anybody can become a part of a crowd. It's very easy. When the riot is going on, you just pick up a rock and you join everyone else. You throw the Molotov cocktail, you smash the window.
So if you were to write 12, I've got the first 6 chapters of your book. So if you were to write a supplement to Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, here's how the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters go. Chapter 1, preparation is not maps. Chapter 2, understand how people live locally. Chapter 3, get to a place where people live locally. Chapter 4, try to be accepted to a place where people live locally. Chapter 5, try not to be picky about leaving. And Chapter 6, anyone can be part of a crowd. This is general. This is some solid 6 chapters. Maybe I can consolidate 2 of those chapters into one. But
well, I keep coming back to a simple point, and I think it's just a lot of these philosophical issues. A lot of the problems of philosophy. And
he's got this Saskatchewan accent. I mean, you've got this Detroit or this Michigan accent. I think you guys could be good personalities. You need a good narrating voice. And I think you've got one. You're nearly Canadian from where you're from, eh?
Look, the difference between myself and Peterson is I think Peterson, he is still about people being successful in a Western crowd setting, and that's the psychologist in him, which is a therapy. The therapist is not about overturning society, although Peterson has got a little bit of that in him, which is his dangerous aspect. But fundamentally, I think he's really about people being healthy within the world that they are born into. And this is a very hard world to be healthy in, and I think he acknowledges that. I'm talking about something different. I'm saying for certain young men, it won't be enough to go on a trip and come back and feel healthy in the Western life and to read Jordan Peterson's books. For certain young men, it's going to take something a lot bigger, a lot more extreme. And this is going to be a small group of young men, but this group of young men is going to be the group of young men that does things, that writes the great books, that pushes things forward in a new way. It won't be the successful therapy projects of Jordan Peterson. And the fact that Jordan Peterson has got a crowd is enough to tell me, he's got his own crowd now, is enough to tell me that he's onto something which is a little too accessible.
Well,
the young men that I am talking
Peterson
about
has touched on,
are not interested
Peterson
in
has
that.
touched on this, though. I mean, so many times that I don't want to say it's repetitive, because I think every time he recognizes it's moving. And even though he's been moved on camera about a half a dozen times now, the guy is brought to tears. And he's brought to tears because he says, I'm just giving basic advice to people, and I'm getting thousands of letters about how these people are not killing themselves or how they're not doing drugs suddenly, like opiates and all that kind of shit, because he's giving them basic encouragement. But to the point you're saying is that, you know, there's a crowd forming. It's a sad and strange crowd that I think he would not want. And obviously, if people are strong enough to leave their culture and create something greater, I mean, that's his. He's not writing books for people that are doing that. I mean, the people that left Europe and founded America. I mean, Peterson is obviously not going to say, "Oh, you're escaping your responsibilities for making Europe a better place." I think as a Canadian, you know, group of people that left Europe themselves, he's got to be indebted to the concept of, you know, the whole British progenitor thing, where if you weren't the firstborn, you didn't get anything. So you had to go out and stake your claim on the world. He gets that, and I think he would want to learn the perspective of people that have actually gone and have done something like that, which is why I think that he was when Peterson was interviewed.
He's a Westerner.
But
he's a Westerner, and he's working within the
I get you, but I just wanted to finish one thought, is that his most recent podcast is Peterson is interviewing this young guy, not the other way around. All these guys interview Peterson because he's gotten popular, but here Peterson, with his new platform or his company or his helpers, he set up a video conference in, I don't know what the city was, but really well produced interview with this kid, but it was Peterson initiating the interview. And I think that he's interviewing people, and this kid, you know, this is the kid that grew up kind of where we grew up, and he didn't go to college, but has this great organization. And Peterson was literally deferentially interviewing this kid and saying, how did you as a kid, because this kid's been thinking this way since junior high apparently, how did you decide that a clash with your teachers and your administrators was something natural to you, and how did you so positively transform all these negative experiences with these teachers into such a great thing? And how did you not go to college, and how did you create this organization? And the kid's story is incredible. He wanted to go to West Point, and he got the senatorial recommendation and all that stuff, but they didn't let him in. And I guess you could back into the fact that they're excluding guys of his type from pursuing this type of vocation these days. But Peterson, I think would want to pick your brain about how you solve your problems.
Yeah, but I think, and getting back to this, tying back into this idea of the local, what really is the most local is your family. And I come from a certain lineage and a certain history, family history, and I have got
Sven
the
Sven
family
Sven
that I do
Sven and
have.
Hulu. Sven and Hulu.
Sven and Hulu back in the 18th century, traced back to him. But there's some very, very fine men who are part of this lineage, which you can't get over that. And there's been a breakdown of the family, and I think Peterson talks about this kind of thing, but it really starts there. And I'm not sure Jordan Peterson in his books and everything is going to be enough to overcome people who have had a bad family life and don't have that connection to something important in the family. That really is essential.
Yeah, but I mean,
and if you don't have that, you're starting out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get your point, but I mean, I remember I was out with Tucker. Yeah, I fished with Tucker. Did I ever talk about fishing with Tucker?
Yeah, you fished with
Yeah,
Tucker.
but
I know.
You know Tucker.
Camped with
Yeah,
him?
but
Camped with him on
you know
the Kenai?
you know Tucker.
I know Tucker.
Tucker offered
Yeah, I know
Tucker offered
Tucker.
you a
I
job
know.
on the boat that I fished on. I mean, or did
I'm not sure he offered. I don't think he offered me a job. I don't think that happened.
well, I mean,
I don't
you
know
were
what you're talking.
okay. I mean, yeah, but I mean,
I know Tucker though.
Yeah.
I know him.
well, so
Yeah.
so Tucker, he worked on the boat and he taught me all the knots and everything like that, and then right when we were about to fish, he quit, went on another boat, and so we had nobody to fish with, and so my skipper decided to go on dry dock, and so the first 3 weeks I worked with him, was getting paid $10 an hour to take the paint off the boat and to treat it and then paint it again and to clean up the boat. And then we went back and Tucker joined us because he was having a bad time on the boat that he was working on. The guy, he overworked the guys, he overfished the guys, and then they didn't pay him, which was even.
Oh, I know about that boat. I remember that
Yeah.
boat. Yeah.
But then I drove around the Kenai with Tucker in my Jeep. His Jeep had some issues. The issue with my Jeep was that my heat eventually broke, but it wasn't an issue when I was traveling with Tucker. It didn't break until it got particularly cold. But I remember there was one night we were camping outside of Soldotna, and this was in grizzly territory. And so he said to me, hey man, even if you're going to brush your teeth with like the sugar-free toothpaste, I want you to do it like a quarter mile away. So get all the way down, almost to the gravel road, because the bears will smell it. And so he got in his tent, and I gave him my Glock, and I said, Tucker, the bear's just going to shove it in your ass if he goes in your tent in the middle of the night. He said, yeah, I know, but I'm going to give it the college try. And I think that's the whole point, is that no matter what your odds are, you got to get up that fucking hill. That's what Peterson's point is. You got to give it the college try. You got to, if a bear's going to get in your tent, you got to pop off some rounds. Got to defend yourself.
Yeah, well, the difference though is that we're talking about internet crowd formation versus like some bastard up in Alaska who's going to sleep outside in a tent in grizzly territory in the winter and worried about brushing his teeth. I think you're going to get your shit together pretty quickly if those are the concerns you have and you're up in Alaska doing that. Which I think is the whole point we've always been trying to make, which is that you've got to make physical these psychological concerns. If you can make them physical, a lot of them disappear, and you are no longer overwhelmed by them. And I think by going off on your own and being in Alaska territory is a good way to do it. But I also think joining a local community of people and feeling like you're a part of some local community is another way to do it. But I don't think that moving to a city and being anonymous and getting drunk in a bar is going to do a lot for you.
Now,
And getting some job. I don't think that's going to do it.
Let's get back to the nitty-gritty of Peterson. I've only learned this in an introduction from a speaker, from MC in one of his debates or speeches. But apparently Peterson has some connection with the Inuit or some Canadian tribe. He built half his home by hand in a style of some tribe, and he was initiated or adopted into some tribe. Something about Peterson tells me that he's got some knowledge of the local and the benefit of the local, and this ties into his...
Well, I think he does. But I think more importantly about Peterson is he's depressive and he's a suicidal guy. His kids.
What?
No, it is. He was on antidepressants most of his life, and his kids were too. I mean, he's got
Peterson,
a family.
Really?
He's got a family lineage. Yeah, he's got a family lineage of suicidal depression, and that's why it's not a surprise to me that he's a leader of crowd formation of disenfranchised.
This is the news flash. Is that?
No, he's open about it. He's a very, very close to pulling the trigger, blowing his brains out. I mean, I probably thinks about it every day. I mean, why do you think Nietzsche and all the Gulag stuff appeals
Jesus
to him
Christ,
so much?
because he had mentioned that he had a friend who lived with him. His friend didn't go to college, but it was a smart guy. He said his friend must have had like off the charts IQ, worked manual jobs or something like that, and then lived with him and his family. He was trying to help his friend out, and then his friend ended up killing himself. I had heard that, but I'm surprised that Peterson, he was on antipsychotics. He took pills.
Well, I don't know about that. He was on antidepressants. He's open about that. His daughter was too. His daughter, she does YouTube videos and talks about it.
Really?
It's not a secret by any means. And I don't think when you see a guy like that, you think that he's someone who's had it always very, very together in his life. I think any guy who's a leader of a great crowd is probably a depressive person. I think there's something about being leaders of crowds that's a response to depression. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist like he is. I couldn't really explain it. But I will say, though, that I think that he appeals so much to people because he comes from that same vein of depressives, whether they're Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, all the stuff he cites is out of that depression literature and philosophy, and he's able to present it well.
Yeah.
And he's got a crowd of depressives. I mean, the Western world has got a lot of
Is that an actual literary term? I've never heard that. Depression literature, not depressive, but depression literature.
Yeah, and I'm not talking the 1930s. I'm talking the 1830s, 1860s, when everyone's started feeling bad about stuff. The only happy guy who was really happy about everything was Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer, I think, was very happy, and John Gray, the English philosopher, I think he's very happy. And I don't think these guys are depressive at all. That's the difference. And maybe a lot of these Buddhist guys, were able to turn the depression on their head.
I mean, it's funny. The nihilists go fuck everything guys are probably the happiest. I mean, maybe this is the point I'm trying to drive, is that the stuff that you and I did and the shit that I still want to do, where I'm happy living in a tent and riding my bike and just breaking it up every day. Maybe that really at the end of the day is not very constructive. And it's an antidote to what you call the depression literature, because I was incapable of writing depression literature when I'm dehydrated and abused by the wind, camping on a lunar moonscape where the fucking wind bends my tent in 3 shapes, and I spend an hour in vain trying to put 10-pound boulders inside my fucking tent so the goddamn thing doesn't blow away. And then I'm going in 35-degree wind to go to a lake to fill up a gallon jug that I found abandoned on the side of the road that I picked up 10 miles earlier, filling it with ice cold water, giving myself a hypothermic bath to get in a tent which is already fucked up by the wind, and I consider that a good time. That's and then I write about it as if I'm having the greatest time of my life. That's the antidote to depression literature. Now it's making me think that Peterson maybe hasn't had enough of those experiences.
I don't know. I can't really judge the guy. But I would say to the people that are a part of his crowd, if you really want to get out of this bad mental state, just go do something where the consequences of fucking up are much more serious. Where you could hurt yourself, you could hurt someone else, you could die, you could kill someone else, and just have those kind of consequences. You know, I've been reading this book. It's I don't think it's a great book. But I really like the guy, and I really like the idea of the book. It's this Sebastian Junger guy. He wrote this book called Tribe, where he tries to understand post-traumatic stress disorder. And it is quite interesting, some of the studies that he finds, which is that cultures that have people who have been exposed already to extreme circumstances and are also very tight-knit, they have very, very low incidences of post-traumatic stress, particularly like Israeli soldiers who are constantly under fire. They live their life under constant threat of annihilation from their Arab neighbors. They have the lowest post-traumatic stress characteristics
we ran into a lot of those guys. We ran into a lot of those guys and girls. You did and I did. In Patagonia.
Oh, and... Well, in South America,
I ran into a lot. I don't like them.
I don't like them.
The
I don't
Israelis
like
had a
them
bad rap
culturally, but
the Israelis had a bad rap in South America because they and there were some places that wouldn't even take them because they would party a little bit too hard because they had gone through a 2-year period of
Well, they're very but
my point is that the ones when you get them
though that they don't have post-traumatic stress is they're very insular. They're very together. They don't invite other people in. But
what do they do? They go and they're very successful at traveling in Patagonia, and they have the issue for them of being alone, of starting a fire, of finding water, and being in the remote area. For them, it's very easy, and I think it's very peaceful. I think it's very interesting that a lot of these Israeli soldiers go and do the very thing that we did, even after having challenged themselves in dangerous military service. It's a very interesting observation that you tie in the Israelis' ability to by forming a local culture avoid the PTSD. And
well, Sebastian Junger was saying it. He was making another point, which is his central point, which is that post-traumatic stress is a result of a warrior returning to a culture that does not understand his service, that does not understand his sacrifice. And he compares it to Indian tribes who appreciated their warriors and lauded them when they returned, and they were immediately reintegrated into their tribal society as hunters and different things, and they were appreciated for their achievements. And Israeli culture, everyone has to do military service. So you can't. It would be crazy in Israel to walk. For an Israeli to come up to another Israeli and say, "Hey, veteran, thank you for your service," or something like that, because they're all veterans. So they're all sharing in the same experience. And there's something about that sharing of the experience of wartime, which Junger is arguing is essential to dealing with the stress of the events of war.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, though, this could apply to a lot of different aspects of culture. Do you have a local community that will accept your depression, will accept your heartbreak, will accept? I mean, do you have some people close to you that can accept
the tribe that accepted the crazy medicine man, the crazy shaman who's basically schizophrenic? Not only did they not get
but those were important people that were able to deal with the extreme traumas, right?
Yeah.
Like the shaman would be the guy you'd bring in when the local community didn't know how to deal with some guy who was responding to events in a very different way than they had the ability to deal with. So the shaman would come in, the medicine man would come in. So I mean, we live in a culture
and
now.
He was kind of a nutcase like Peterson. The shaman is kind of
exactly
a nutcase.
Exactly, but I mean, can you be a shaman to?
I mean,
YouTube viewers? Can you be a shaman for 5 million people?
No, but yeah.
I mean, a shaman experience is a very
okay.
Is a very
okay. I got you, and I'm going to mark that down. Hang on. Can you be a shaman for 5 million people? Okay, I'm going to bracket. Can I bracket that question for a second though? But because I just wanted to make the general correlate that Peterson taking antidepressants is not too far away from the shaman who's known from being like the marijuana smoker or the peyote user or the ayahuasca user. He has a deep connection with different medicines that help heal a soul. And I don't know much about Prozac or the other things, but I wouldn't want to say that if a guy's going to off himself today, and if you give him Prozac now, if he doesn't kill himself today, that's good. I mean, I know people say, oh, suicide's very heroic, and I know you can take great risks, and if you lose your honor in life and things have gone bad, maybe I would say the suicide is okay. But so maybe Peterson, understanding these Western psychedelics, the Prozacs and whatever else people take, it's not too far away from the shaman understanding the different things that can give people. Maybe that's a bad metaphor, because I really think that the ayahuasca and the peyote and the marijuana give people a window to something special.
Well, I don't know. Look,
I was just trying to reach. I was trying to say that he's kind of like the mad shaman in some ways.
Yes, but there's a prior step though, which is that the shaman is there to perform a certain act, right? But after that act has been performed, there needs to be a reintegration in some sort of local healthy society. If you don't have a local healthy society of a small group or a family or something, how could the shaman possibly have a positive effect? He's performing a radical sort of psychological surgery of some form, whether it's with ayahuasca or counseling or Jungian therapy or whatever he's doing. But if you have nothing to return to, you have no grounding in anything, you're just being once again cast off to the winds. And I think that's why people just want to be a part of this crowd, and they don't really want to be helped. Because if they're helped and they're told they're healthy by the shaman and they've gone through the curative stages and they're sent back out, what are they sent back out to? I think actually people are just happy to sit in Jordan Peterson's classes. They don't actually want to be cured of anything. Because to be cured by and to be told by Jordan Peterson, you're ready to go back into the world now, what fucking world are they going back into? I mean, they don't have a world to go back into. They don't have a family. They don't have a local community. They don't have any of the grounding things that are important for the ideas to take root. They have no terroir. They have no soil with which these things could grow. So I think there's two stages to it. I mean, you look at these tribal cultures. There's a small group of people. They had families. They had close connections. And the shaman was there for the extreme cases. But now we're talking about a whole society of people of extreme cases who have no grounding in anything. How do you deal with those people? I think it's a lost cause. I think it's great he's going to make a lot of money and be on a Live Nations tour, but it's not going to go anywhere. It can't go anywhere. There's no grounding.
So the shaman just it takes those who have lost their way and it brings them back to the tribe. And your point is that the Peterson, if it's some type of shaman figure, he's leading people back to what you think is already a path of destruction. I mean, but now,
no, I'm just saying there's nowhere to lead them back to. They're appealing to Peterson for help, and he's the shaman, but the shaman is to break people down to reintegrate them into some tribe. He's trying to reintegrate them into the West, right? I mean, he gives examples of women coming to him saying, "I'd like to make more in my job. I'd like to make as much as the men do," and he gives them ways to do that and go about doing that. But I mean, What the fuck is that, man? And now he's trying to do it like with real serious psychological problems that people have because they already don't have families and they already don't have local communities and they're already disenfranchised and alienated. I mean, they have nowhere to go back to. After this Peterson shaman has treated them, they may feel healthy, but where are they going? There's nowhere to go.
I mean, I think this is the whole point of this podcast is that what is the difference between the people who leave the West and experience this great other culture and those who attack the West and want to transform it into some neo-Marxist project? I mean, there's a clear difference. There's a clear difference, but this is why I think people like you and I could be confused with the neo-Marxists who are attacking the West, because we're not attacking the West just because we have a hatred for it. I mean, we want another way of life, but rather it's due to an alienation and a boredom which leads to greatness through some individual project. Is there a slaughterhouse? Are you doing this podcast in a slaughterhouse? I was having a really hard time concentrating, but that's probably. But I just the guilt is that I listen to Peterson and I listen to him say, look, a lot of this has to do with these fucked up academics poisoning young people in universities. And I immediately feel guilty because I say, well, if you take the stuff that I say the wrong way, I'm almost as bad as those people. And I'm trying to figure out, well, I'm not as bad as those people. I don't want to do something bad for anybody. But at the same time, I'm very critical of the West, and I understand the alienation and boredom that the West can generate. But in response, I'm proposing something very positive that I think Peterson would understand. But at the same time, you're coming back and saying, well, should Peterson help anybody? Because if these people are already products of a certain population or a certain crowd, that
I don't know. I proposed in the last podcast that he was just providing another articulate side to a battle between two crowds, and it could never resolve itself in anything that was interesting at all. And it may give people the illusion of being helped, but it's the same illusion that perhaps a social justice warrior also feels about helping the world around them. And I guess it leads back to my central concern, which is just that any crowd formation is suspect. And really, if you want to get to a positive place, it's a local environment. It's a family environment. It's a small group of people, small group of friends. It's all of these things. That is the place you need to try and find somehow. And if you can't find it, Peterson is not going to be able to help you find it. He can help you deal with some radical issues and stuff like that. But if you've got no local place to go back to be a part of, then you're going to be alienated. You're just going to be floating. You're going to be adrift. The answer is not to get a job or not to do all these things. I mean, that's
it's possible that I haven't read most of his books and most of the chapters of his books. I mean, there might be a solution that he might have an answer to what we're posing right now. And it might be, I mean, he wrote this thing, stop and pet every cat.
Well, the answer is be born into a good family, be born into a good local community. And guess what? You will have no interest in anything Peterson is talking about. You're not going to be troubled by the concerns that his followers are troubled by. You just won't. Those problems won't exist for you.
Well, I mean, but in all honesty, I mean, like, you can't have advice for somebody in the form of be born into a good family. I mean, that's a kind of impossible advice.
No, it's not advice. It's not advice at all. But it's trying to demarcate the people who he's relevant for and the people who he's not relevant for. unfortunately, we have so many bad families and lack of local environments that people live in this general crowd world of the virtual and all this stuff, and they're very confused, and they're turning anywhere for direction. And they've turned to this shaman figure in Peterson, and I think he's got a lot of good things to say. But until you've cleared the ground and established what people as human beings historically have had, and Peterson cites this all the time about evolution and where we come from, and it's a very conservative idea in the sense that we come from these local communities. But this needs to be stressed more and more and more. If you want to have a healthy life, if you want to feel good, get a good family, get good friends. Start there. Get a culture that you feel comfortable with. It's not going to be living in some big city environment and working in some big corporation. If you're looking in those places, getting drunk all the time and living that way, you're not going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to have any of that. And in fact, you can read all the Peterson you want, and you can listen to all of it you want and watch him. But if that's what you keep returning to, you're going to feel bad. You're not still going to feel good. You've got to establish the ground. The ground is something local. The ground is something familial. It's friends. It's these tight bonds. If you don't have that, then the shaman, I don't think, can save you.
So, if you do not have friends and tight bonds, there's nothing the shaman can do to save you.
No. The shaman is about the reintegration of troubled people back into those tight bonds. Those situations which exist, which are, people with open arms saying, come back to us, come back to us. We need the shaman to help this guy come back to us. That's what the shaman is for.
Yeah. So, I mean, the shaman can only help people who can be saved. They cannot help people who can't be saved. They cannot, if you're in hell already, the shaman can't bring you out of it. He can.
Well, I guess the question is, can you be saved if you have no chance at heaven? Can you actually be saved?
Can't. So the shaman doesn't. The shaman leads people to a positive spiritual world, but he can't bring people out of hell. I mean, that's like saying you can train an athlete to be healthy, but you can't take a person with crippled legs and make him be a great athlete. Or you can't take a dead.
I think there you go. I think, and that's I think the problem right now in terms of this war of ideas that's going on, is that there are a bunch of fucking idiots fighting it out in hell over two sets of ideas. They're still in hell. They're still in hell.
Okay, this is a really great metaphor we just jumped up on. I mean, isn't this a very fit metaphor?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone wants salvation. This could be the real sense of nihilism that maybe Peterson is kind of ironically unaware that he's a part of, which is that the nihilism he thinks he's avoiding, he's actually engaging himself and encouraging by having this war at a groundless, baseless, hellish place with people who also think they're fighting for some heaven. They're both condemned to hell, both sides. I mean, isn't that nihilism? When you fight something out and you think there's some meaning there, but you're in hell one way or the other, whether you fought or you didn't fight.
I mean, it's very stark. That's a very stark interpretation. Because, well, I mean, if you're in the West, that's a very stark interpretation. It's to me to hear that it's very depressing. But I think the thing that's positive is that you could escape the West. You could leave.
Well, I mean, by the West, we need to specify, though. I mean, we're talking about these massive urban centers and these corporations.
So rural America is obviously something we haven't touched on, but there's a lot to be said about it.
We'll go to rural America is not, for me, rural America is not the West. If we're going to say the West is all these nasty things, rural America is not.
It's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that when you live in a city.
Local people.
It's easy to forget that if you live in a big city in Texas or a big city in Chicago or whatever, it's very easy to forget that rural America has incredible experiences.
Well, this is the ground, though. These are people that are closer to the earth and the animals and nature and the earth. I mean, all that. And so if you're talking about a way to heaven in the middle of Manhattan, you're not going to find it easily. I mean, there's no way to heaven there. You're just not going to get there. There's no shaman that can help you. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want. You can, he can help you get more money if you're a woman corporate executive through some therapy. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that he can tell you, but it's self-help. It's self-help in hell, and self-help in hell will never get you to heaven.
Yeah, that's a good line. If you were talking about a way to heaven in the middle of Manhattan, you are not going to find it.